Before we dive into this tale of lost love and unexpected redemption, drop a comment below telling us which city you're watching from. And once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Oh, and make sure to follow our channel for more stories like this. Now, sit back and enjoy every detail. The Mediterranean sun cast golden streaks across the private beach on the Italian Riviera as Elias Vance walked along the shoreline, his Italian leather loafers sinking slightly into the warm sand. At 42, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had built an empire from scratch. His tall, athletic frame moved with purposeful grace, dark hair perfectly styled despite the ocean breeze, and steel-gray eyes that had closed deals worth billions now focused on nothing but the rhythm of the waves. The Brunello Cucinelli linen shirt he wore hung perfectly on his broad shoulders, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms that spoke of early morning workouts and weekend sailing. Everything about Elias Vance screamed success, from his Patek Philippe watch to the way he held his crystal wine glass with the practiced ease of someone who had attended countless high society gatherings. But tonight, none of that mattered. He had come to the Riviera to decompress after a particularly brutal acquisition that had taken 8 months to close. His global logistics company, Vance Dynamics, had just absorbed 3 smaller competitors, and the stress of negotiations had left him feeling older than his years. Elias took a sip of the crisp Vermentino and let his mind wander to simpler times, times when business wasn't everything, times when he had someone to share sunsets like this with. Clara. It had been 3 years since their divorce was finalized, and he still found himself thinking about her at moments like these. Not with regret, exactly. Elias Vance didn't do regret, but with something that felt uncomfortably close to it. He had loved her. God, how he had loved her. Clara Hayes, with her warm hazel eyes that lit up when she talked about the children's books she taught. Her cascade of honey-blonde curls that always smelled like vanilla and summer rain, and that infectious laugh that could fill an entire room. She had a way of seeing magic in ordinary moments that had both fascinated and terrified him. But love hadn't been enough. The memory surfaced unbidden. Clara sitting at their kitchen island in their Boston penthouse, a glossy brochure spread between them. Fertility clinics, treatment options, hope shining in her eyes like starlight. "We could start trying," she had said softly, her fingers tracing the edge of the pamphlet. "Dr. Miller says there's no reason we can't have a family." The words had hit him like a physical blow. Family. Children. The very things that represented chaos to his ordered world, that threatened to upend everything he had worked to build. "Clara, we've talked about this," he had replied, his voice gentler than his words. "I'm not father material. I work 16-hour days. I travel constantly. What kind of life would that be for a child?" But even as he said it, Elias knew those weren't the real reasons. The truth was uglier, more selfish. He liked their life exactly as it was. The spontaneous weekend trips to his ski chalet in Vermont. The quiet evenings when she would grade papers while he reviewed contracts. The way her attention was focused entirely on him. A child would change everything. And change terrified him more than any boardroom battle ever could. The sound of laughter pulled him from his thoughts, and Elias looked up to see a woman walking along the beach about 50 yards ahead. She moved with a familiar grace, one hand holding what appeared to be a small bucket. The other, his breath caught in his throat. The other hand was holding the tiny fingers of a child. No, 2 children. A little boy and girl, both with sandy hair catching the last rays of sunlight. Both stumbling adorably as they tried to keep up with the woman's longer strides. The woman turned slightly, angling toward the water, and Elias's wine glass slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering against a piece of driftwood. It was Clara. His ex-wife was walking along a beach in Italy with 2 toddlers who couldn't be more than 2 years old, and she was laughing. That same musical sound that used to make his heart skip beats, but now she was laughing with them. For them. Because of them. Elias stood frozen as the impossible reality crashed over him, like the Mediterranean waves at his feet. Clara had children, the children she had begged him for, pleaded for, cried for, in the privacy of their bathroom when she thought he couldn't hear. She had found a way to have them without him. The little girl stumbled and fell into the shallow surf, her delighted squeals mixing with her brother's giggles as Clara scooped her up, spinning her around before setting her safely back on her feet. The pure joy on Clara's face was radiant, transformative. She looked exactly like the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago, but somehow more complete in a way she had never been with him. As if sensing his stare, Clara glanced in his direction. Their eyes met across the beach, and for a moment, time seemed to stop entirely. Recognition flickered across her features, followed by something Elias couldn't quite read. Not anger, not pain. Something far more unsettling. Peace. Interactive question 1. How do you face the person whose dreams you refuse to share, only to discover they found a way to make those dreams come true without you? What is the strongest emotion Elias is feeling right now? Share your thoughts in the comments. Clara's steps slowed as she processed the familiar figure standing motionless on the beach. Even from this distance, she recognized everything about him. The way he held his shoulders, the confident tilt of his head, the expensive casual wear that somehow still looked like a business meeting. Elias Vance, looking exactly as devastatingly handsome as the day she had signed their divorce papers. The little boy, Leo, tugged on her flowing white sundress, his chubby fingers sticky with sand and seawater. "Mama Castle," he declared, pointing enthusiastically at a pile of wet sand that barely resembled anything architectural. "Yes, sweetheart, we'll build the biggest castle," Clara murmured, but her voice carried a slight tremor that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. Her daughter Maya had wandered closer to the water's edge, her tiny pink swimsuit a bright spot against the darkening sand. Elias was walking toward them now, his long strides eating up the distance between them with the same purposeful determination she remembered from their marriage. Some things never changed. Clara straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. At 37, she had grown into herself in ways that had nothing to do with age, and everything to do with becoming the woman she was meant to be. Her honey blonde hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders, sun-kissed from days spent outdoors with the twins. The flowing sundress she wore moved gracefully with each step, complementing her natural curves in a way that spoke of quiet confidence rather than vanity. She had learned to love herself completely, something she realized now she had never truly done during their marriage. "Clara." His voice was exactly as she remembered, deep, measured, with that slight rasp that used to make her pulse quicken. "Elias." She kept her tone neutral but not cold. "I have to say, of all the beaches in all the world," a ghost of a smile touched his lips at the reference to their old favorite movie. "Casablanca was always more your speed than mine." Maya chose that moment to toddle over, her arms raised imperiously toward Clara. "Up, Mama, up!" Without hesitation, Clara swept her daughter into her arms, settling the little girl on her hip with practiced ease. Maya's dark hair, so like Elias's, was damp with seawater, and her hazel eyes, definitely inherited from Clara's side, studied the tall stranger with curious intensity. "They're beautiful," Elias said quietly, and something in his voice made Clara look at him more carefully. There was an expression in his steel-gray eyes she had never seen before. Wonder, maybe, or regret. "Thank you." She adjusted Maya's position, smoothing down the little girl's unruly curls. "Leo, Maya, this is Elias, an old friend of Mommy's." Leo, ever the social butterfly, waved enthusiastically from where he was now attempting to eat a handful of sand. "Hi, Elias." "Hi there, buddy." Elias's voice was surprisingly gentle as he crouched down to Leo's level. "That's quite a castle you're building." "Big castle for Mama and Maya and me," Leo announced proudly, spitting out sand with each word. Clara found herself studying Elias's profile as he engaged with her son. The sharp line of his jaw, the way his dark hair fell slightly across his forehead, the expensive cologne that still made her think of safety and home, despite everything that had happened between them. He was 42 now, and the years had only made him more distinguished. There were fine lines around his eyes that hadn't been there during their marriage, and she wondered what had put them there. "They're twins," she offered, because the silence was stretching, and Maya was starting to fidget. 26 months old. Elias straightened slowly, his gaze moving between the children and then settling on her face. She could practically see him doing the math, calculating dates and timelines with the same precision he applied to business deals. "The timing," he began, then stopped himself. "I went to the clinic 6 months after our divorce was finalized," Clara said simply. "I used my own eggs, donor sperm. It took 3 attempts. She paused, shifting Maya to her other hip. I wasn't going to wait anymore. The words hung between them like a bridge. Neither was quite ready to cross. Clara watched as understanding dawned in Elias's eyes, quickly followed by something that looked almost like pain. "Clara, I don't," she interrupted, the same word she had used on the beach, but gentler this time. "Please don't say whatever you're thinking of saying. Not here. Not in front of them." Leo had abandoned his sandcastle and was now tugging on Elias's perfectly pressed linen trousers, leaving tiny sandy handprints on the expensive fabric. Instead of pulling away, Elias looked down at the little boy with genuine interest. "Can you help?" Leo asked hopefully. "Castle is hard." Elias glanced at Clara, a question in his eyes. She found herself nodding, despite every instinct telling her to gather her children and walk away. "I suppose I could try," Elias said, settling onto the sand beside Leo with zero regard for his designer clothes. "Though I should warn you, I'm not much of an architect." "That's okay," Leo declared cheerfully. "Mama says we learn by doing wrong things first." Clara felt her cheeks warm at having her parenting philosophy quoted back to her by her 2-year-old. But watching Elias, this man who had once been terrified of the very idea of children, sitting in the sand and seriously discussing the structural integrity of a toddler's sandcastle, was surreal enough to make her wonder if she was dreaming. Maya squirmed to be put down, and soon both children were helping Elias build their masterpiece, which mostly involved them knocking down whatever he managed to construct while giggling uproariously. For a moment, Clara allowed herself to imagine what it might have been like if things had been different. If Elias had been ready for this kind of chaos and joy when she had needed him to be. But that was a dangerous path, and she had learned long ago not to walk down it. "The resort is beautiful," she said instead, needing to fill the silence with something safe. "Are you here on business?" "Vacation, actually." Elias's hand stilled in the sand. "First one I've taken in, well, probably since our honeymoon." The reference to their week in Santorini hit her like a physical blow. Those had been the happiest 7 days of her life. Just the two of them. No work calls, no schedules, nothing but sunshine and laughter, and the kind of love that had made her believe if anything was possible. "Mama, look!" Maya had somehow managed to stick a piece of seaweed on top of their lopsided sand creation. "Princess Castle," "It's perfect, baby girl," Clara managed, her voice thick with emotion she couldn't quite name. When she looked up, Elias was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For just a moment, she saw the man she had fallen in love with, the one who had surprised her with weekend trips to small bookshops, who had learned to make her grandmother's cookies just to see her smile, who had once told her she was the missing piece he hadn't even known he was looking for. But that man had also been the one who had looked at her with genuine fear when she had mentioned children, who had worked late rather than come home to discussions about their future, who had loved her completely, except for the part of her that had wanted to be a mother. The irony wasn't lost on her that he was sitting here now, covered in sand and seaweed, looking more relaxed with her children than he had ever looked at the thought of having his own. The next morning arrived with the kind of Mediterranean perfection that travel brochures promised, but rarely delivered. Clara sat on the terrace of her villa, watching Leo and Maya chase butterflies through the resort's carefully manicured gardens while she sipped her morning espresso. The twins had been up since dawn, their internal clocks still adjusting to the time change, but she didn't mind. These quiet moments before the day truly began had become sacred to her. She had chosen this particular resort specifically for its family-friendly atmosphere and the private villas that gave her space to breathe. After 2 years of round-the-clock parenting, she had learned to treasure any moment of relative peace. The villa was modest by luxury standards, but perfect for their needs. A spacious living area that opened onto the garden, a kitchen where she could prepare the twins' familiar foods, and bedrooms that allowed her to maintain their routines even while traveling. Clara had worked double shifts at the private academy, where she taught to afford this trip. It was their first real vacation together, and she had wanted it to be special, a celebration of how far they had come, how much they had grown as a little family of 3. She hadn't planned on ghosts from her past materializing on Italian beaches. "Mama, butterfly landed on me." Maya's delighted squeal pulled Clara from her thoughts. Her daughter stood perfectly still in the garden, a monarch butterfly perched delicately on her outstretched finger, her hazel eyes wide with wonder. "Very gently, sweetheart," Clara called softly. "Let it choose when to fly away." Leo, not to be outdone by his sister's butterfly encounter, had discovered a lizard sunning itself on one of the stone garden walls and was attempting what appeared to be a serious conversation with it. His animated gestures and the earnest expression on his little face made Clara smile despite the emotional turbulence of the previous evening. She was so absorbed in watching her children that she almost missed the figure approaching along the garden path. Almost. Elias walked with less confidence than usual, his hands tucked into the pockets of perfectly tailored khaki trousers. He wore a navy polo shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his frame. But there was something tentative in his approach that was entirely unlike the man she remembered. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, when he reached the edge of the terrace. "I asked at the front desk. They said the Rosewood villas were in this direction." Clara set down her espresso cup with deliberate care. "You asked the front desk for my location." A flush crept up Elias's neck, and she realized with surprise that he was actually nervous. "I told them I was looking for an old friend. They were very thorough in their questioning before they would point me in the right direction." Despite everything, Clara found herself fighting a smile. The resort staff had indeed been protective when she had checked in as a single mother with twins. It was oddly comforting to know they took their guests' privacy seriously. "Elias!" Leo had spotted him and was already running across the garden at full speed. To Clara's amazement, Elias dropped to one knee and caught the little boy, in what appeared to be a practiced motion, swinging him up in a gentle arc that sent Leo into peals of laughter. "Good morning, buddy," Elias said, and there was genuine warmth in his voice. How did you sleep? I dreamed about the castle, Leo announced importantly. It was big as a mountain and had dragons, but nice dragons that liked ice cream. That sounds like the best kind of dragon, Elias replied, seriously, as if 2-year-old dream logic made perfect sense to him. Maya, butterfly forgotten, toddled over to inspect this interesting adult, who seemed to understand her brother's particular brand of enthusiasm. She studied Elias with the intense scrutiny that only small children could muster, her head tilted to one side. You're tall, she observed finally. You're very observant, Elias replied gravely. That's an excellent quality to have. Maya considered this assessment and apparently found it satisfactory, because she wandered off to continue her exploration of the garden's treasures. Clara watched this entire exchange with a growing sense of unreality. The Elias she had known would have been checking his phone by now, making polite but distant conversation, while his mind was clearly elsewhere. This version of him seemed genuinely present, genuinely interested in her children as actual people, rather than obstacles to adult conversation. They're remarkable, Elias said quietly, his gaze following Maya as she discovered a family of small frogs near the garden fountain. You've done an incredible job with them. They're remarkable because they're themselves, Clara replied carefully. I can't take credit for who they are. You can take credit for giving them the space to become who they are, Elias said, and something in his tone made her look at him more closely. That's not a small thing. There was weight behind his words, as if he had given considerable thought to the concept of nurturing potential rather than directing it. It was a perspective she wouldn't have expected from the man who had once measured success purely in terms of acquisitions and market share. Would you like some coffee? The invitation was out before she could stop herself. I was just about to make a fresh pot. Elias's smile was careful but genuine. I'd like that very much. As she moved into this villa's small kitchen, Clara could hear Elias engaging with the twins through the open doors. Leo was apparently giving him a detailed tour of the garden's most interesting features, while Maya had appointed herself supervisor of the entire operation. This is where the frogs live, Leo was explaining with the authority of someone who had spent exactly 18 hours becoming an expert on Mediterranean wildlife. They sing at night, but they're sleeping now because frogs need lots of sleep to grow big and strong, like Mama says I need. That makes perfect sense, Elias agreed. Do you think they dream about lily pads? Obviously, Leo replied, with the exaggerated patience of a child explaining something obvious to a slower adult. What else would frogs dream about? Clara found herself pausing in the middle of measuring coffee grounds, struck by the easy way Elias had fallen into the rhythm of toddler conversation. It required a particular kind of mental flexibility to follow the leaps and bounds of 2-year-old logic. And yet, he seemed to be managing it without effort. When she returned to the terrace with 2 cups of steaming coffee, she found Elias sitting cross-legged on the stone tiles, with both children climbing over him like he was a particularly accommodating piece of playground equipment. Maya had somehow managed to wind a strand of jasmine from the garden through his dark hair, while Leo was using Elias's knee as a launching pad for increasingly ambitious jumps. I see you've been recruited, Clara observed, settling into one of the wrought iron chairs and extending a coffee cup toward him. It seems I'm a jungle gym, Elias said, accepting the coffee while carefully maintaining his position so as not to dislodge his small passengers. I'm told this is a very important job. The most important, Clara confirmed. And for a moment, the years fell away, and she could almost pretend this was just another morning, just another day, in a life they might have shared. But then Maya tugged too hard on the jasmine in Elias's hair, and he winced slightly, and the spell was broken. This wasn't their life. These weren't his children. This was a chance encounter on an Italian vacation. Nothing more. "Clara," Elias said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that the twins wouldn't overhear. "About last night." "Don't," she interrupted, the same word she had used on the beach, but gentler this time. "Please, not yet." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "When you're ready, then." "Then I may never be ready," she said honestly. "I know," he replied, and there was something that sounded almost like peace in his acceptance. "But I'll wait anyway." The simplicity of the statement, the lack of pressure or expectation behind it, caught her off guard. This was not the man who had once tried to solve their problems with grand gestures and expensive gifts, who had thought that wanting something badly enough was the same as being ready for it. Leo chose that moment to attempt a particularly ambitious leap from Elias's shoulder, miscalculated badly, and ended up in a giggling heap on the terrace stones. Elias moved to help him up with quick reflexes and gentle hands, checking for scrapes or bruises with the thoroughness of someone who understood that small hurts needed big attention. "I'm okay," Leo announced cheerfully, already planning his next acrobatic feat. "I'm brave like Mama." "Yes, you are," Elias agreed, his gaze finding Clara's over the little boy's head. "Just like your mama." And in that moment, Clara felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first small crack in the wall she had built around her heart 3 years ago. Middle CTA. Hit the like button if you think Elias is genuinely changing. Do you believe his newfound patience is real, or just a temporary vacation act? Comment. Your thoughts below. 3 days passed in an unexpected rhythm that none of them had planned, but all seemed to accept. Elias appeared each morning around breakfast time, never presumptuous, always asking if he could join them. Clara found herself saying yes more easily each day, though she couldn't quite explain why. Perhaps it was watching him patiently help Leo build increasingly elaborate sand structures that would inevitably be destroyed by the next wave, or seeing him carry Maya on his shoulders when her little legs grew tired during their walks along the resort's winding paths. There was something fundamentally different about this version of Elias, a gentleness she had glimpsed during their marriage, but which had always been overshadowed by his relentless drive and ambition. On this particular morning, they had ventured to the resort's private cove, a secluded stretch of beach accessible only to villa guests. Leo and Maya were napping in the portable beach tent Clara had set up, the exhaustion of morning exploration finally catching up with them. The sound of their soft breathing mixed with the gentle lapping of waves created a peace that Clara hadn't realized she was craving. She sat on a beach towel, reading while keeping one eye on the tent, when Elias emerged from the water. He had been swimming laps in the calm bay for the better part of an hour, his powerful strokes cutting through the Mediterranean with the same precision he applied to everything else. Water streamed from his dark hair as he walked up the beach, and Clara found herself momentarily transfixed by the sight of him. At 42, Elias had maintained the athletic build that had first caught her attention at a mutual friend's party 8 years ago. His chest was broad and defined, his stomach flat with the kind of muscle definition that spoke of disciplined morning workouts. But it wasn't just his physical presence that made her breath catch. It was the expression on his face, relaxed and content in a way she had rarely seen during their marriage. "The water's perfect," he said, toweling off before settling onto the sand beside her towel, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "You should go in." "Maybe later," Clara replied, though they both knew she wouldn't. She had never been comfortable leaving the twins, even when they were sleeping safely nearby. "You look like you needed that swim." "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately," Elias admitted, running the towel through his hair. "The physical activity helps." "Thinking about what?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, and she immediately regretted the implied invitation for deeper conversation. Elias was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than defensive. About the man I used to be, about the choices I made. He paused, his gaze focused on the horizon rather than her face. About how I measured success by what I could control rather than what I could nurture. Clara closed her book, marking her place with careful deliberation. That's a profound realization. It's a devastating realization, Elias corrected quietly. Do you know what changed my perspective? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. About 6 months after our divorce was finalized, my assistant quit. Clara remembered Camilla, an efficient woman in her early 50s, who had managed Elias's schedule with military precision and genuine care for his well-being. She had worked for Mimi for 8 years, and she gave her notice on a Tuesday with no explanation other than personal reasons. I pressed her for details because, frankly, I couldn't understand why anyone would leave such a well-compensated position. She finally told me that her daughter had been diagnosed with leukemia, and she needed to be available for treatments and hospital stays. She said she had tried to hint at needing more flexibility, but I had been too focused on quarterly projections to understand what she was really asking for. Elias's jaw tightened. Her 8-year-old daughter was fighting for her life, and I had been annoyed by Camilla's occasional early departures and personal phone calls. The weight of his confession settled between them, like a stone dropped into still water. Clara could picture it perfectly. Elias in his corner office, irritated by disruptions to his carefully orchestrated schedule, completely missing the human crisis happening right in front of him. "What did you do?" she asked softly. I told her to take whatever time she needed, that her position would be waiting when she was ready to return. I covered her salary and her daughter's medical expenses. He finally looked at her, and she was startled by the raw honesty in his expression. But that wasn't the wake-up call. That came later. Maya made a small sound in her sleep, and both adults turned their attention toward the tent. After a moment of silence, Clara prompted, "What was the wake-up call?" Camilla's daughter recovered beautifully. I got updates through HR, and eventually Camilla did return to work, though only part-time. About a year later, she invited me to her daughter's 9th birthday party. Elias's voice grew softer. I almost didn't go. I told myself I was too busy, that it would be awkward, that employee-employer boundaries were important. But you went. I went. And I watched Camilla's daughter, Emily, blow out her candles, surrounded by people who loved her unconditionally. Her grandparents, her cousins, family, friends, who had supported them through the worst year of their lives. And I realized that I had never experienced that kind of love, not the receiving it or the giving it. Clara felt something tighten in her chest. "Clara, you offered me that," he continued, his voice barely audible above the sound of the waves. "You offered me the chance to be part of something bigger than quarterly earnings and market share. You wanted to create a family with me, and I was too terrified of losing control to see what a gift that was." The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of unspoken truths. Clara found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his nose, the slight crease between his eyebrows that appeared when he was deep in thought, the way his shoulders carried tension even in relaxation. "I spent the next 2 years in therapy," Elias said finally. "Not because I thought I could win you back. I knew that ship had sailed. But because I realized I didn't know how to love without conditions, how to value relationships over achievements, how to be present instead of always preparing for the next challenge." "And did you learn?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "I'm still learning." He turned to face her fully, and she was surprised by the vulnerability in his steel-gray eyes. "But watching you with Leo and Maya these past few days, seeing the kind of mother you are, the way you've created this beautiful life for them, it's shown me what I was too afraid to reach for." Leo chose that moment to wake up, his sleepy voice calling for Mama from inside the tent. Clara moved to help him out, grateful for the interruption and the chance to process Elias's words. When she emerged with a drowsy but alert little boy on her hip, she found Elias packing up their beach supplies with quiet efficiency. "Are we going back?" Leo asked, still groggy from his nap. "Soon, sweetheart," Clara replied, settling him back on the towel where he could wake up gradually. "How was your nap?" "I dreamed about swimming with dolphins," Leo announced seriously. "They taught me how to hold my breath underwater for a really long time." "That sounds like an excellent skill to have," Elias said gravely, and Leo beamed at having his dream treated with such respect. Maya stirred next, emerging from the tent, with her dark hair sticking up at impossible angles, and the imprint of the towel she had been sleeping on pressed into her cheek. She looked around with the bewildered expression of someone trying to remember where they were, then spotted Elias and broke into a sleepy smile. "Elias!" she exclaimed, toddling over to him, with arms outstretched. Without hesitation, Elias scooped her up, settling her on his lap, where she immediately began the important work of examining the zipper on his swim shirt with intense concentration, watching him with her daughter, the gentle way he held her, the patience with which he answered her nonsensical questions about why water was wet and sand was sandy. Clara felt the wall around her heart develop another small crack. This was dangerous territory. She had built her life around the certainty that she and the twins were complete as they were, that they didn't need anyone else to make them whole. But seeing Elias like this, seeing the man he might have been if he had been ready 3 years ago, made her wonder what they might be missing. As if sensing her thoughts, Elias looked up and caught her watching them. For a moment, something passed between them. Not the desperate longing of their marriage, but something quieter and more profound. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For letting me be here, for giving me the chance to see who you've become." He paused, adjusting Maya more comfortably on his lap. "For showing me what love looks like when it's not afraid." The call came at 7:02 in the morning, jarring Clara from the first truly peaceful sleep she'd had in months. Leo and Maya were still curled up in the villa's master bed, where they had migrated sometime during the night, their small bodies warm against hers. The harsh ringing of her phone seemed obscenely loud in the Mediterranean quiet. "Ms. Hayes." The voice was crisp, professional, and immediately set her on edge. "This is Patricia Montrose from Willowbrook Academy. I'm sorry to call so early, but we have a situation that requires your immediate attention." Clara slipped out of bed carefully, padding to the living room so as not to wake the twins. Patricia was the academy's head mistress, a woman who prided herself on handling crises with minimal drama. If she was calling during what should have been summer break, something was seriously wrong. "What kind of situation?" Clara asked, though she already suspected what was coming. "I'm afraid we've discovered some financial irregularities in our accounting department. The preliminary investigation suggests that approximately $200,000 has been misappropriated over the past 18 months. Patricia's voice carried the careful neutrality of someone delivering devastating news. "Unfortunately, some of the discrepancies appear to involve payroll advances and benefit allocations that may affect your employment status." The words hit Clara like ice water. "I don't understand. Are you saying my job is in jeopardy?" "I'm saying that we need to conduct a thorough review of all financial transactions, including salary payments and benefit distributions. Until we can sort out what was legitimate and what was fraudulent, the board has voted to suspend all non-essential personnel pending the investigation." Non-essential. The phrase stung more than it should have. Clara had given 4 years of her life to Willowbrook Academy, had built their children's literature program from scratch, had worked extra hours without complaint to make ends meet as a single mother. "How long will this investigation take?" she managed to ask. Potentially several months. I know this is difficult timing, Miss Hayes, especially with the twins, but the board felt they had no choice given the severity of the situation. After Patricia hung up, Clara stood in the villa's living room, watching the sun rise over the Italian countryside, through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was in one of the most beautiful places on Earth, finally taking the vacation she had saved for over 2 years. And her entire financial foundation had just crumbled beneath her. The savings account she had carefully built up for emergencies would cover maybe 3 months of expenses if she was careful. The rent on their small apartment in Boston's South End alone would eat through most of it. She had no family to fall back on. Her parents had died in a car accident 5 years ago, and she had no siblings. It had always been just her, and now just her and the twins. And a soft knock at the villa's front door interrupted her spiral of worry. Through the window, she could see Elias standing on the small porch, holding what appeared to be a breakfast tray. He had developed the habit of bringing pastries from the resort's bakery for the twins' morning snack. She considered not answering. The last thing she needed right now was to maintain the careful emotional balance required for interacting with her ex-husband while her world was falling apart. But the twins would wake soon, and they would ask for Elias if he didn't appear as expected. "Good morning," Elias said when she opened the door, but his greeting died on his lips when he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she said automatically, then caught herself. There was no point in pretending. "Actually, everything. I just lost my job." Elias set the breakfast tray on the side table without taking his eyes off her face. What happened? Despite her better judgment, Clara found herself explaining the situation. There was something oddly comforting about Elias's immediate focus and attention, the way he listened without interrupting, the familiar tightening around his eyes that indicated he was already working through potential solutions. "They can't just suspend you without cause," he said when she finished. "If you weren't involved in the financial irregularities, they have no legal grounds to." "They can, and they did," Clara interrupted. "Private schools have different employment protections than public institutions. And even if they didn't, I can't afford to fight it. Legal battles take time and money, neither of which I have." From the bedroom came the sound of small voices. The twins were waking up. Leo's cheerful chatter mixed with Maya's sleepy protests created the familiar soundtrack of morning in the Hayes household. "Mama!" Leo's voice carried clearly through the villa. "Maya's stealing my pillow!" "I'm not stealing," Maya protested indignantly. "I'm sharing." "That's not how sharing works," Leo countered with the logic of a 2-year-old who is still working out the finer points of property rights. "I should go," Clara said, but Elias caught her arm gently. "Let me help," he said quietly. "Elias, no." The response was immediate and firm. "Whatever you're thinking, the answer is no. I won't take your money. You don't even know what I'm going to suggest. I know you well enough to know that your solution will involve money, and I won't take your money." She pulled away from his touch, needing the physical distance to maintain her emotional resolve. "I got myself into this situation, and I'll get myself out." "You didn't get yourself into anything," Elias said, his voice carrying an edge of frustration. "You were working at a job you loved, supporting your children, doing everything right. The fact that someone else embezzled money is not your fault." "Mama!" This time Leo's voice was accompanied by the sound of small feet hitting the floor. "Where are you?" "I need to get them ready for breakfast," Clara called back, then turned to Elias. "At least let me watch them while you make some phone calls," Elias offered. "You're going to need to contact other schools, update your resume, maybe reach out to former colleagues. That's easier to do when you're not managing 2 toddlers. The practicality of his offer was undeniable, but accepting help from Elias felt like opening a door she had worked hard to keep closed. She had built her independence carefully, deliberately, over the past 3 years. Taking his assistance, even something as simple as childcare, felt like a step backward. "Clara," Elias said softly, reading her hesitation with the accuracy that had always unsettled her. Sometimes accepting help isn't weakness. Sometimes it's just practical. Before she could respond, Leo appeared in the living room doorway, his dark hair sticking up at impossible angles, and his pajamas twisted around his small frame. Maya was right behind him, rubbing her eyes with tiny fists. "Elias!" Leo's face lit up when he spotted Elias. "Did you bring breakfast?" "I did indeed," Elias replied, his voice automatically shifting to the gentler tone he used with the twins. "Fresh croissants and that jam you liked yesterday." "The orange one?" Maya asked hopefully, suddenly more alert. "The orange one," Elias confirmed. And both children cheered with the enthusiasm that only small people could muster for citrus preserves. Watching Elias with her children, the easy way he had learned their preferences, his patience with their endless questions, the genuine delight he seemed to take in their company, Clara felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't the man who had been too busy for family dinners, too focused on work to notice when she was struggling. This was someone who had learned to be present, to pay attention, to put relationships before achievements. But she also knew that accepting his help, even with the best intentions, would complicate everything. It would blur the careful boundaries she had established, make her vulnerable in ways she wasn't sure she was ready for. "Please," Elias said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that the twins wouldn't overhear. "Let me do this one thing, not because you need rescuing, but because they're important to me now. Because you're important to me." The simple honesty in his voice broke something loose inside her chest. Not the walls she had built. Those were still firmly in place. But perhaps one small brick that had been holding everything else together. "One phone call," she heard herself saying. "I'll make one phone call while you watch them have breakfast." Elias's smile was careful but genuine. "One phone call," he agreed, as she watched him settle onto the floor with Leo and Maya, spreading out their breakfast like it was a picnic, and listening gravely to Leo's detailed explanation of why jam needed to be distributed evenly on both halves of a croissant. Clara realized she was facing a choice she hadn't expected to make. She could handle this crisis alone, as she had handled everything else for the past 3 years. Or she could allow herself to lean just slightly on someone who had proven that people could change, that growth was possible, that the man who had once been too afraid of love might have learned to embrace it. The question was whether she was brave enough to find out which version of Elias would still be there when the crisis passed. The phone call to the Boston School District's emergency hiring line lasted exactly 12 minutes and delivered nothing but dead ends. Budget cuts had eliminated most mid-year positions, and the few openings available wouldn't be posted until late August, too late to help with rent due in 3 weeks. Clara ended the call and stared at her phone, fighting the urge to throw it across the villa's pristine living room. Through the windows, she could see Elias and the twins in the garden, engaged in what appeared to be an elaborate game involving fallen oranges from the citrus trees and a complicated scoring system that only Leo understood. Maya was perched on Elias's shoulders, her small hands tangled in his dark hair as she provided enthusiastic commentary on her brother's athletic prowess. The sight should have warmed her heart, and it did. But it also highlighted exactly how much they stood to lose when reality crashed back in. Her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor in Boston. "Rent notice posted on your door. Building management wants to talk about lease renewal. Mention of rent increase. Call me." Clara closed her eyes and let herself have exactly 30 seconds of panic. 30 seconds to imagine packing up their small apartment, moving to some cheaper borough where she could afford a studio apartment if she was lucky. 30 seconds to picture Leo and Maya's confusion when their routine was disrupted, their small world made smaller. Then she opened her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and walked outside to rejoin her family. "Mama," Leo announced proudly when he spotted her. "I scored 17 points. Elias says that's excellent for someone with short legs." I said, "Excellent for someone whose legs are perfectly proportioned for his age," Elias corrected with mock seriousness, winking at Clara over Leo's head. "We don't discriminate based on leg length in this household." 17 points is very impressive, Clara agreed, settling onto the garden bench where she could watch their game continue. "What exactly are the rules?" "You have to throw the orange into the bucket, but if it bounces out, you get half points," Leo explained, with the patience of someone explaining quantum physics to a particularly slow student. "And if Maya cheers really loud, you get bonus points because encouragement is important." "Those are excellent rules," Clara said gravely. "Very fair and well thought out." Elias caught her eye, and must have read something in her expression, because he gently lifted Maya from his shoulders and suggested that perhaps it was time for the twins to practice their swimming in the villa's small pool. Within minutes, he had them distracted with water games, leaving the adults to talk. "Bad news?" he asked quietly, settling beside her on the bench. "All of the news is bad," Clara admitted. "No job prospects until August at the earliest. And my neighbor says there's a rent increase notice on my door. Even if I find something immediately when we get back, I'm looking at least 2 months of unemployment." "What about savings?" "We'll cover maybe 6 weeks if I'm careful." She watched Maya attempt a handstand in the shallow end of the pool, her little legs kicking wildly as Elias steadied her. "I've been putting money aside for their college funds instead of building a larger emergency fund. Seemed like the responsible thing to do at the time." Elias was quiet for a long moment, his attention apparently focused on Leo's increasingly creative diving techniques. But Clara knew that look. His mind was working through problems and solutions with the same systematic approach he applied to business negotiations. "I have a proposition," he said finally. "Elias, hear me out," he interrupted gently. "I'm not talking about charity or handouts. I'm talking about a mutually beneficial arrangement." Despite her better judgment, Clara found herself curious. "What kind of arrangement?" "I've been looking for someone to manage the children's literacy program for the Vance Foundation. It's a new initiative focusing on underserved communities in Boston. The position would involve curriculum development, teacher training, and program implementation." He paused, watching her reaction carefully. "The salary would be competitive with what you were making at Willowbrook, with better benefits and more flexibility." "You're offering me a job at your foundation." The words came out flat, skeptical. "I'm offering you a job you're uniquely qualified for. You have a master's degree in children's literature, 4 years of program development experience, and a track record of successful implementation. The fact that you're also someone I trust implicitly is a bonus, not the primary qualification." Clara felt something twist in her stomach. Trust implicitly. "We're divorced, Elias. Our marriage ended because we couldn't agree on fundamental life choices. Our marriage ended because I was afraid of change," Elias corrected quietly. "That doesn't mean I ever stopped respecting your intelligence, your dedication, or your expertise. You're brilliant at what you do, Clara. You always have been." From the pool, Leo called out excitedly that he had successfully touched the bottom with both hands, an achievement that required immediate adult acknowledgement and celebration. They dutifully provided the necessary praise before returning to their conversation. "Even if I believe the job offer was legitimate," Clara said carefully, "working together would be complicated for both of us, but especially for Leo and Maya." "Why?" "Because they're already getting attached to you." The admission came out more vulnerable than she intended. "They ask for you every morning. Maya draws pictures of Elias with crayons. Leo has started incorporating you into his bedtime stories. And when this vacation ends, when we go back to our real lives..." "Who says it has to end?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Clara felt her heart skip a beat, not from hope, but from fear. This was exactly the kind of moment she had been dreading. The moment when the careful boundaries between past and present began to blur. Elias, you can't just insert yourself into our lives because you've decided you want children after all. It doesn't work that way. I'm not trying to insert myself anywhere, he said, his voice carrying an edge of frustration. I'm trying to figure out how to be part of something beautiful that already exists. There's a difference. Is there? Clara challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've discovered what you were missing, and now you want to claim it. But they're not your children, Elias. This isn't your family. You can't just step in and what? His voice was sharper now, the careful control he had maintained for days beginning to fray. Love them? Care about their well-being? Want to make sure you have the resources you need to give them the life they deserve? Yes! The word exploded out of her with more force than she intended. Because loving them isn't enough if you're going to leave again when things get difficult or complicated or messy. They've never known what it's like to have a father figure, so they don't know what they're missing. But if you let them love you and then disappear... She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. They both understood the devastation she was describing. Elias was quiet for a long time, watching Leo and Maya play in the pool with an expression she couldn't read. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, measured. I know I don't have the right to ask for your trust. I know I forfeited that when I let fear make decisions for both of us 3 years ago. He turned to face her fully, and she was surprised by the raw honesty in his expression. But I'm not the same man who walked away from our marriage because he was afraid of what love might cost him. How can I know that? The question came out as barely a whisper. Because I'm not asking you to take my word for it, Elias replied. I'm asking you to let me prove it. One day at a time, one choice at a time, for as long as it takes. From the pool, Maya's voice called out cheerfully. Mama! Elias! Look how long I can hold my breath! She promptly dunked her head underwater for approximately 2 seconds before popping back up with a triumphant grin. That was amazing, sweetheart, Clara called back, her voice thick with emotions she couldn't quite name. As she watched her daughter beam with pride at the acknowledgement, Clara realized she was facing the most difficult decision of her adult life. She could protect her heart and her children's hearts by maintaining the safe distance she had built over the past 3 years. Or she could take the terrifying leap of allowing Elias to prove that some people really could change, that some mistakes could be learned from rather than repeated. The question was whether she was brave enough to find out which choice would ultimately hurt less. The decision came to Clara at 3 o'clock in the morning, the way important decisions often do. Quietly, without fanfare, in the space between sleep and wakefulness. She lay in the villa's master bed, Maya curled against her left side, and Leo sprawled across her legs, their soft breathing the only sound in the Mediterranean darkness. Tomorrow was their last full day in Italy. The day after that, they would board a plane back to Boston, back to an uncertain future that felt more overwhelming with each passing hour. The practical part of her mind, the part that had kept them afloat for 3 years, knew that Elias's job offer was the lifeline she needed. The emotional part of her heart was terrified of what accepting that lifeline might cost. But lying there in the dark, listening to her children dream, Clara realized she was asking the wrong question. Instead of wondering whether she could trust Elias not to hurt them, she should be asking whether she could live with herself if she let pride prevent her from giving Leo and Maya the best possible future. When morning came, she found Elias on the resort's main terrace, sitting alone at a table overlooking the bay. He was dressed for travel, khaki slacks and a navy blazer that made his eyes look almost blue in the early light. 2 cups of coffee sat cooling on the table in front of him, and she realized he had been waiting for her. "You're leaving today," she said, settling into the chair across from him. It wasn't a question. "My flight leaves at noon." He studied her face with careful attention. "I wanted to say goodbye to Leo and Maya before I go." "They're still sleeping." She accepted the coffee he pushed toward her, grateful for the warmth against her suddenly cold hands. Late night, Maya had nightmares about leaving the butterflies behind. "And what about you?" Elias asked quietly. "Any nightmares about what comes next?" "Just the usual maternal anxiety about providing for my children, while maintaining some semblance of emotional stability." She attempted a smile that felt brittle around the edges. Nothing a few more years of therapy can't handle. Elias was quiet for a long moment, his gaze focused on the horizon where fishing boats were heading out for the day's work. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. "I need to tell you something," he said, "about the job offer." Clara felt her stomach drop. Here it was, the revelation that would prove her suspicions correct, that the position was charity dressed up as opportunity. "The Vance Foundation's children's literacy program doesn't exist yet," Elias continued. "I mean, it will exist, but only if you accept the position. I've been considering the initiative for months, but I hadn't moved forward with implementation because I couldn't find the right person to lead it. So, you created a job for me." The words came out flat, disappointed, but not surprised. "No." His response was firm, immediate. "I created a program that desperately needs to exist, and I realized the person best qualified to run it was sitting across from me at our divorce attorney's office 3 years ago." He reached into his blazer pocket and withdrew a folder, setting it on the table between them. "These are real statistics, Clara. Real data about literacy rates in underserved communities throughout Boston. Real research about the impact of early childhood reading programs on long-term educational outcomes." Despite her weariness, Clara found herself opening the folder. The papers inside were extensive. Demographic studies, funding projections, partnership agreements with local community centers, and libraries. This wasn't something hastily thrown together to solve her immediate financial crisis. This was months, possibly years of careful planning and research. The program would serve approximately 15,000 children in its first year, Elias said, as she read through the documents. "We have preliminary agreements with 42 community partners and a 5-year funding commitment from the Foundation's board." Clara looked up from the papers, studying his face for any sign of deception. "When did you start developing this?" "The initial research began 18 months ago. We commissioned the demographic studies last summer, and the board approved the concept 6 months ago." He paused, meeting her gaze directly. "Long before we ran into each other on that beach." The timeline was too specific, too detailed to be fabricated. More than that, the passion in his voice when he talked about the program's potential impact reminded her of the man she had fallen in love with, the one who could become completely absorbed by projects he believed in. "Why didn't you mention any of this before?" she asked. "Because I needed you to know it was real, before I told you how much I hoped you would say yes." His honesty was disarming, and because I was afraid that if I led with the professional opportunity, you'd think I was trying to buy my way back into your life. "Aren't you?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Elias considered it seriously before answering. "I'm trying to build something meaningful that could benefit thousands of children, while also making sure the woman I respect most in the world has the resources she needs to provide for her family." He paused. "If that creates an opportunity for us to spend more time together, to see whether the people we've become might work better than the people we were, I won't pretend I wouldn't welcome that." From the resort behind them came the sound of children's laughter, other families beginning their day, other parents managing the complex dance of vacation logistics and small person needs. Soon, Leo and Maya would wake up, and she would need to explain why Elias wasn't joining them for their final day of adventures. "I can't promise anything beyond professional excellence," Clara said finally. "If I take this job, it's because the program deserves the best leadership possible, not because I'm ready to explore what might have been. I understand, and I need guarantees about boundaries. Leo and Maya can't become casualties if things get complicated between us, professionally or personally." "Agreed. And I want to see the employment contract reviewed by an independent attorney before I sign anything." Of course. His ready agreement to her conditions should have been reassuring, but instead, it made her more nervous. The Elias she had known during their marriage would have argued at least one of her points, would have tried to negotiate terms more favorable to his emotional agenda. This version of him seemed genuinely focused on what was best for her and the children, even if it meant accepting less than he wanted. "There's something else," Clara said, and she could hear the tremor in her own voice. "If I do this, if I take the job and let you be part of our lives again, you need to understand that Leo and Maya aren't just my children anymore. They're people with their own feelings, their own capacity for love and disappointment. You can't treat them like an experiment in whether you're ready for fatherhood." The words hit Elias like a physical blow, and she saw him flinch at the implication. "I would never—" "I know you wouldn't mean to," Clara interrupted, "but good intentions aren't enough when it comes to children's hearts. They love easily and completely, and they remember everything. If you're not absolutely certain you're ready for that responsibility, for the long-term commitment that comes with being important to them, then you need to walk away now." The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of what she was really asking. She wasn't just offering him a chance to be part of their lives. She was asking him to promise that he would stay, even when things got difficult, even when the reality of parenting proved messier and more challenging than the romantic ideal. "I'm ready," Elias said finally, his voice quiet, but steady. "Not because I think I have all the answers, but because I know now that love isn't about having control or knowing what comes next. It's about showing up consistently, especially when things are hard." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his, the simple contact sending a jolt of recognition through her system. "I can't promise I'll be perfect, Clara, but I can promise I'll be present for all of it, for as long as you'll let me." Looking into his steel-gray eyes, Clara saw something she had never seen during their marriage. Not just love, but the courage to choose love, even when it was frightening. Even when it required sacrificing control for the sake of connection. For the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to hope that some endings could become beginnings, that some people really could learn to love without conditions. "Okay," she whispered, the word barely audible over the sound of waves against the cliffs below. "Okay." 6 weeks later, Boston. 6 weeks back in Boston. And Clara was beginning to believe that some fairy tales might actually have foundations in reality. The Vance Foundation's offices occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Midtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the city skyline. Her own office was spacious and bright, with a conference table large enough for the community partner meetings that had become a regular part of her schedule. The children's literacy program was everything Elias had promised, and more. The demographic research was thorough, the community partnerships were genuine, and the funding was not only real, but generous enough to implement initiatives she had only dreamed about during her years at Willowbrook Academy. She had hired 4 full-time staff members, established reading centers in 12 neighborhoods, and launched a teacher training program that already had a waiting list. More surprising than the professional fulfillment was how naturally Elias had integrated into their daily routine. He picked up Leo and Maya from daycare twice a week, usually arriving with some small adventure planned, A trip to the Boston Common Zoo, an exploration of the Children's Museum, or simply a walk through their neighborhood while they told him elaborate stories about the people they observed. On this particular Friday evening, Clara arrived at her apartment to find all three of them in the kitchen, covered in what appeared to be flour and engaged in what Leo was calling the Great Cookie War of Apartment 4B. "Mama!" Maya shrieked with delight when she spotted Clara in the doorway. "Elias is teaching us about measuring, and also about how cookies can be weapons if you throw them at brothers. Strategic cookie deployment," Leo corrected solemnly, his dark hair dusted with flour. "It's very important for kitchen battles." Elias, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor with what appeared to be cookie dough in his perfectly styled hair, looked up at Clara with an expression of amused surrender. "I should probably explain that this started as a lesson in following directions and somehow evolved into full-scale culinary warfare." "Obviously," Clara replied, setting down her briefcase and trying not to smile at the sight of her usually impeccable ex-husband looking completely disheveled and utterly content. "And who's winning this strategic cookie deployment?" "Maya!" both Leo and Elias said simultaneously, causing the little girl to collapse into giggles. "I'm an excellent warrior," Maya announced proudly. "I have good aim, and also I eat the evidence." As Clara watched Elias help her children clean up their baking battlefield, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the sense that her life was not just manageable, but actually joyful. There was an ease to this domestic chaos that she had never imagined possible, a rhythm that felt natural rather than forced. "How was the board meeting?" Elias asked, as they worked together to restore the kitchen to something approaching normalcy. Leo and Maya had been banished to the living room with a plate of slightly misshapen but surprisingly delicious cookies. "Productive," Clara replied, loading flour-covered measuring cups into the dishwasher. "The Roxbury Community Center wants to expand their program to include weekend sessions, and we got approval for the budget increase." "That's excellent news." Elias's smile was genuine, proud in a way that had nothing to do with personal gain. "You've built something remarkable in just 6 weeks." "We've built something remarkable," Clara corrected automatically, then caught herself. The ease with which she had said we was both thrilling and terrifying. Before Elias could respond, Leo appeared in the kitchen doorway with the serious expression he wore when delivering important information. "Mama, there's a man at the door," he announced. "He says he's looking for you, and he seems angry about something." Clara and Elias exchanged glances, both immediately alert. Clara rarely had unexpected visitors, and never ones who would describe themselves to a 2-year-old as angry. "Did he say his name?" Clara asked, moving toward the front door with Elias close behind her. "He said his name was something with an M," Leo replied helpfully. "Like Marcus or Matthew, or maybe it was Monster? I'm not sure." Through the peephole, Clara could see a man in an expensive suit who looked vaguely familiar. It took her a moment to place him. Marcus Blackwood, the attorney who had handled her divorce proceedings. What was he doing at her apartment on a Friday evening? "Marcus," she said, as she opened the door, keeping the chain lock engaged. "What are you doing here?" "Clara, thank God." Marcus looked genuinely relieved to see her. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. Your phone keeps going straight to voicemail." She had turned off her phone during the board meeting and forgotten to turn it back on, a small luxury of her new position that still felt indulgent after years of being constantly available for emergency calls from Willowbrook Academy. "What's wrong?" she asked, though she was already dreading the answer. "It's about your employment situation," Marcus said, his gaze flicking nervously toward Elias, who had positioned himself protectively behind Clara. "There's been a development with the Willowbrook investigation." Clara's stomach dropped. "What kind of development?" "The good kind," Marcus said quickly. "The embezzlement charges have been filed against the former business manager, and all employees have been cleared of any wrongdoing. The school board is offering full reinstatement with back pay and a formal apology. The words should have been welcome news, but instead, Clara felt a strange sense of disconnection, as if Marcus was talking about someone else's life. Willowbrook Academy felt like something from her distant past, not a future she was supposed to return to. They're offering your old position back, Marcus continued, plus a significant raise and improved benefits package. It's really quite generous considering the circumstances. When would they need an answer? Clara heard herself asking. As soon as possible. They want to finalize staffing before the new school year begins. Marcus paused, studying her expression. Clara, this is what you wanted, isn't it? Your old life back, financial security, the job you loved. Before she could answer, Maya appeared at her side, having escaped from the living room to investigate the conversation at the front door. Mama, Maya said, tugging on Clara's skirt with flour-sticky fingers. Leo wants to know if we can have more cookies, and also if Elias can stay for dinner because we're making pasta, and he promised to teach us how to make the sauce swirly. The simple request, so normal, so full of the easy assumptions that had developed over the past 6 weeks, crystallized everything Clara had been trying not to acknowledge. Somewhere between program launches and cookie wars, between professional collaboration and domestic chaos, she had started. So, Elias said finally, when the children had been distracted by a cartoon in the living room. Willowbrook wants you back, apparently. That's wonderful news, Elias said, though his voice carried no conviction. Your name cleared, your reputation restored, everything back to the way it was. Is it wonderful? Clara asked quietly. Going backwards instead of forwards. Elias looked at her with surprise, hope flickering in his steel-gray eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying that 6 weeks ago, getting my job back would have solved all my problems, Clara replied. But now I'm not sure I want my old problem solved. I'm not sure I want my old life back. The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable and terrifying. For 3 years, Clara had built her identity around her independence, her ability to provide for her children without help, her careful control over every aspect of their lives. But the past 6 weeks had shown her something she hadn't expected, that allowing someone else to be part of their story didn't make her weaker. It made all of them stronger. What do you want? Elias asked softly. Clara looked toward the living room, where Leo and Maya were arguing about cartoon character allegiances with the passionate intensity that only toddlers could muster. She thought about the literacy program that was already changing lives, about the work that fulfilled her in ways she hadn't known were possible. She thought about Friday evening cookie wars and Sunday morning pancake disasters, and the way Elias looked when he was reading bedtime stories to her children. Their children, if she was being honest. I want this, she said finally. I want what we're building. I want the chaos and the partnership and the possibility of something I was too afraid to imagine 3 years ago. Elias's smile was slow and careful and absolutely radiant. Are you sure? I'm terrified, Clara admitted. But I'm also sure. For the first time in years, I'm completely sure. As if summoned by some parental instinct, Leo and Maya appeared in the kitchen doorway, having apparently resolved their cartoon dispute in favor of investigating adult conversation. Are we still making pasta? Leo asked hopefully. Because I'm very hungry, and also I think Elias should definitely stay for dinner and for breakfast, Maya added decisively. And maybe forever, because he makes the best cookie wars. Looking at her children's expectant faces, at the man who had learned to love without conditions, at the life they had accidentally built together, Clara realized that some decisions made themselves. Forever sounds like a good plan, she said quietly. and watched as understanding and joy transformed Elias's expression into something that looked exactly like coming home. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October, shattering the peaceful routine Clara had come to treasure. She was in her office at the foundation, reviewing applications for the winter reading program expansion, when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Hayes. The voice was crisp, professional, with the kind of authority that immediately demanded attention. "This is Detective Sandra Reeves with the Boston District Attorney's Office. I need to speak with you about your relationship with Elias Vance." The words hit Clara like ice water. "What kind of relationship?" "Professional and personal, ma'am. We're conducting an investigation into potential financial irregularities at the Vance Foundation, and your name has come up in connection with several large fund transfers." Clara's hands went numb. Through her office window, she could see the city beginning to show the first touches of autumn color. Families walking dogs and pushing strollers through the kind of ordinary Tuesday morning that suddenly felt impossibly precious. "I don't understand," she managed. "What kind of irregularities?" "I'd prefer to discuss the details in person. Can you come down to our offices this afternoon? Say 2 o'clock. "Am I being accused of something?" "At this point, we're just gathering information," Detective Reeves replied, though her tone suggested the distinction was more legal than practical. "I'd recommend bringing an attorney." After the detective hung up, Clara sat in her office, staring at her phone, trying to process what had just happened. Financial irregularities, fund transfers. The same words that had destroyed her life at Willowbrook Academy were now threatening to destroy everything she had built since. Her first instinct was to call Elias, but something stopped her. If there was an investigation into the foundation's finances, if her employment was somehow connected to questionable fund transfers, then their personal relationship was about to become a legal liability for both of them, but especially for Leo and Maya. Instead, she called Marcus Blackwood. "Slow down," Marcus said, after she had explained the situation in one breathless paragraph. "Tell me exactly what the detective said, word for word." Clara repeated the conversation as precisely as she could remember it, noting the way Marcus's breathing changed as she spoke. "This doesn't sound good," he admitted finally. "Financial investigations involving foundations can be extremely complex, especially when there are personal relationships involved. The optics alone could be damaging, even if there's no actual wrongdoing." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your employment at the Vance Foundation, combined with your personal relationship with Elias, could be interpreted as quid pro quo, a job in exchange for other considerations." The implication made Clara's stomach turn. "That's not what happened." "I believe you," Marcus said gently. "But perception can be as damaging as reality in these situations. We need to be very careful about how we handle this." The meeting at the district attorney's office was a nightmare, dressed up as a professional consultation. Detective Reeves was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who asked pointed questions about Clara's hiring process, her salary compared to similar positions, and the timeline of her relationship with Elias. "According to our records, you were hired at the Vance Foundation approximately 3 weeks after your divorce from Mr. Vance was finalized," Detective Reeves noted, consulting a thick file folder. "That's quite a coincidence." "The divorce was finalized 3 years ago," Clara corrected. "I was hired 6 weeks ago." "My mistake." The detective made a note, but her expression suggested the error had been intentional. "Still, you have to admit the timing is interesting. Unemployment, financial difficulties, and then suddenly a high-paying position at your ex-husband's foundation." Marcus placed a warning hand on Clara's arm before she could respond. "My client's qualifications for the position are well documented." "I'm sure they are," Detective Reeves replied smoothly. "But we're also looking at some unusual fund transfers that occurred shortly after Ms. Hayes' hiring. Large amounts of money moved from the Foundation's general fund to the Children's Literacy Program with minimal oversight or documentation." Those transfers were approved by the board, Clara said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Every expenditure was authorized and documented according to Foundation protocols. Protocols that Mr. Vance had significant influence over as the Foundation's primary benefactor and board chair. Detective Reeves leaned forward slightly. Ms. Hayes, I want you to understand that we're not necessarily suggesting you were aware of any wrongdoing. It's possible you were simply a convenient tool for someone else's financial maneuvering. The words were carefully chosen to sound sympathetic while delivering maximum impact. Clara felt the foundation of her new life crumbling beneath her, built as it was on trust and hope, and the belief that Elias had genuinely changed. I think we're done here, Marcus said, standing abruptly. If you have specific allegations to make, we'll address them through proper legal channels. Otherwise, my client has answered your questions. Outside the DA's office, Clara felt like she might vomit on the courthouse steps. The autumn air was crisp and clean, but she couldn't seem to catch her breath. What happens now? She asked Marcus. Now we wait to see what evidence they actually have, he replied. And we hope this is a fishing expedition rather than a genuine investigation. And if it's not? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then you need to decide how much you're willing to sacrifice to protect the people you love. That evening, Clara sat in her apartment, staring at her phone, trying to work up the courage to call Elias. Leo and Maya were asleep, exhausted from a day at daycare that had included what Leo described as the most important finger painting in the history of art. Their normalcy, their innocent trust in the stability of their world, made everything more unbearable. When Elias's key turned in the lock at 7:30, their usual dinner time, Clara felt her heart break a little. He looked exactly as he had that morning when he'd kissed her goodbye and promised to pick up groceries for their planned evening of homemade pizza and terrible movies. Confident, happy, unaware that their carefully constructed life was about to implode. Hey, he said, setting grocery bags on the kitchen counter. How was your day? Mine was incredibly boring, which these days I'm learning to appreciate as a luxury. Elias, we need to talk. Something in her tone made him go very still. What's wrong? Clara told him about the detective's call, about the questions and implications, and the suggestion that she had been an unwitting tool in some kind of financial scheme. She watched his expression change from confusion to understanding to something that looked like devastation. They think I created the job to funnel money, he said quietly. They think I used you. Did you? The question hung between them like a blade. Clara hadn't meant to ask it so directly, but now that the words were out, she found she needed to hear his answer more than she needed to protect his feelings. No, Elias said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. Every dollar spent on the literacy program is accounted for and legitimate. Every hiring decision was made by committee. Every protocol was followed exactly as written. Then why is there an investigation? Because someone wants there to be an investigation, Elias replied, his business instincts finally catching up with his emotional shock. Because someone benefits from making the Foundation look corrupt or incompetent. Who would benefit from that? Elias was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly working through possibilities and connections. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight with anger. Vanessa Nash. Who's Vanessa Nash? My former business partner. We had a falling out 2 years ago over some acquisition strategies I thought were ethically questionable. She's been trying to destroy my reputation ever since. Elias ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Clara recognized as his response to extreme stress. She knows about our divorce, about your employment at the Foundation. She knows exactly how to make this look suspicious. Can you prove that? Not yet, but I will. His voice carried the same determination she remembered from their marriage, when he would work 18-hour days to solve problems that seemed impossible. Clara, I swear to you, everything about your job, everything about the program, it's all legitimate. "I believe you," she said quietly. But that might not be enough. They stood in her kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of their domestic happiness. Artwork from Leo and Maya stuck to the refrigerator, coffee mugs from their morning routine still in the sink, the grocery bags full of ingredients for a family dinner they might never get to cook. "What are you saying?" Elias asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. "I'm saying that loving you might not be enough this time. Not if it means destroying everything we've built. Not if it means putting Leo and Maya through another scandal. So you're going to walk away? Give up on us because someone else is trying to tear us down?" "I'm going to protect my children," Clara said, her voice breaking on the words. "Even if it means protecting them from the man I love." The admission that she loved him, that walking away would be sacrifice rather than relief, seemed to hit Elias harder than all the legal implications combined. "Give me a chance to fix this," he said desperately. "Give me a chance to prove that what we have is worth fighting for." "How long?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "I don't know." "That's what I was afraid of," Clara replied. "I can't ask Leo and Maya to live in uncertainty while we figure out whether loving each other is going to destroy us. They deserve better than that." As she watched Elias's face cycle through disbelief, anger, and finally resigned understanding, Clara realized that some kinds of love required sacrifice, that sometimes protecting the people you cared about meant letting them go, even when letting go felt like dying. 3 months of silence stretched between them like an ocean. 3 months of Clara declining Elias's calls, returning his gifts unopened, and watching Leo and Maya ask increasingly less frequently when Elias would visit again. 3 months of pretending that walking away had been the right choice, while every fiber of her being screamed that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. The vindication came on a cold February morning, delivered not through a phone call or legal document, but through a news report that Clara almost missed while getting the twins ready for daycare. In a stunning development in the ongoing investigation into foundation fraud, prosecutors have dropped all charges against the Vance Foundation and its employees, the morning news anchor announced. The investigation has instead focused on Vanessa Nash, former CEO of Nash Capital Management, who has been arrested on charges of corporate espionage and filing false reports with federal authorities. Clara's hand stilled on Maya's coat zipper as the reporter continued. According to sources close to the investigation, Nash allegedly fabricated evidence against the foundation in an attempt to damage the reputation of her former business partner, Elias Vance. The scheme unraveled when investigators discovered that Nash had paid a former foundation employee to provide falsified financial documents. Leo tugged on Clara's sleeve. "Mama, you're squeezing too tight." She looked down to realize she had been gripping Maya's coat with white knuckles. "Sorry, sweetheart," she murmured, loosening her hold and finishing the zipper with trembling fingers. The Foundation's children's literacy program, which was specifically targeted in Nash's allegations, has been cleared of any wrongdoing, the reporter concluded. The program will continue its operations without interruption. After dropping the twins at daycare, Clara sat in her car outside the building for 20 minutes, staring at her phone. She had resigned from the foundation the day after the investigation began, taking a temporary position at a local library to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Marcus had advised her that returning would be professionally appropriate now that the charges were dropped, but she wasn't sure she had the courage to face what she had walked away from. More than that, she wasn't sure Elias would want her back after the way she had ended things. The decision was taken away from her when she arrived home that evening to find him sitting on the steps outside her apartment building. He looked older than she remembered, with new lines around his eyes and a weariness in his posture that spoke of sleepless nights and stress. But when he saw her, his face transformed with relief and something that looked like hope. "I've been waiting for 2 hours," he said, standing as she approached. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me, Elias," she began. but he held up a hand. "Let me say this first before I lose my nerve." He took a deep breath, and she could see his hands shaking slightly. "I should have fought harder for us 3 months ago. I should have refused to let you walk away. Should have made you understand that what we had was worth defending." "You did understand," Clara said quietly. "That's why you let me go. Because you knew that fighting would have hurt Leo and Maya, and you cared more about their well-being than your own." "That's what I told myself," Elias admitted. "But the truth is, I was terrified that if I pushed too hard, you'd realize you were better off without me again." From inside the building, Clara could hear the familiar sounds of her neighbors' evening routines. Children playing, televisions murmuring, the comfortable chaos of families settling in for the night. It was the life she had built for herself and the twins, safe and predictable and carefully controlled. It was also incomplete in ways she had tried desperately to ignore. "Vanessa Nash?" she asked. "Arrested yesterday. Turns out she'd been planning this for months, waiting for the right opportunity to make me look corrupt." Elias's voice carried satisfaction mixed with exhaustion. She underestimated how thoroughly the Foundation documents everything. When investigators started digging into her allegations, they found the inconsistencies almost immediately. "So it's over. The legal part is over. The professional part is over." He paused, studying her face with the careful attention she remembered from their marriage. "But the personal part, that's up to you." Before Clara could respond, the building's front door burst open, and Leo came flying down the steps, having apparently spotted them through the lobby windows. "Elias!" he shouted with the pure joy of a 2-year-old whose favorite person had suddenly reappeared. "You came back! Maya, come quick!" Elias came back. Maya appeared moments later, moving with more dignity, but equal enthusiasm. She walked straight to Elias and held up her arms in the universal toddler signal for being picked up. "We missed you," she said simply as he lifted her. "Mama was sad, but she said you had important business to take care of." "Very important business," Elias agreed seriously. "But it's finished now." "Good," Leo declared with the authority of someone who had given the matter considerable thought. "Because we have new drawings to show you. And also, Mama learned how to make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs." Watching Elias with her children, seeing the way his entire demeanor softened when they were near, the careful attention he paid to their words, the genuine delight in his expression, Clara felt the last of her carefully constructed defenses crumble. "Are you staying for dinner?" Maya asked hopefully. "We're having spaghetti, and also probably chaos because Leo thinks he can twirl noodles, but he's not very good at it yet." "I don't know," Elias said, his gaze finding Clara's over Maya's head. "That depends on your mama." The weight of the decision settled over her like a familiar coat. She could invite him upstairs, could let them fall back into the rhythm they had found before Vanessa Nash's schemes had torn them apart. Or she could maintain the safe distance she had built, could protect all of them from the possibility of future hurt. But looking at her children's faces, seeing the hope and love they made no effort to hide, Clara realized that protection wasn't always the most loving choice. Sometimes love required risk, required the courage to believe that what you were building together was stronger than what could tear you apart. "Spaghetti and chaos sounds perfect," she said quietly. "But I should warn you, Leo wasn't exaggerating about his noodle-twirling skills." Elias's smile was radiant, transformative. "I think I can handle a little chaos." As they climbed the stairs to her apartment, Leo chattering excitedly about everything that had happened in Elias's absence, while Maya maintained her position in his arms like she never intended to let go again, Clara felt something settle into place in her chest. Not the desperate hope of their marriage or the careful optimism of their Italian reunion, but something deeper and more durable. The understanding that love wasn't about avoiding problems or controlling outcomes. It was about choosing again and again to build something together that was worth defending. "Elias," she said as he helped Maya out of her coat in the apartment's small entryway. Yes, I love you. The words came out simple and clear, without qualification or condition. I love what we built before, and I love what we could build now, and I love that you let me walk away when I thought I needed to. His response was to kiss her, soft and sure, and full of promises they were both finally ready to keep. When they broke apart, Leo was making exaggerated gagging sounds, while Maya clapped with delight. Does this mean Elias gets to stay for breakfast too? Maya asked hopefully. Forever breakfasts, Leo added decisively. Because families eat breakfast together, and we're a family now. Looking around her small apartment, at the children who had made her brave, at the man who had learned to love without conditions, at the life they had accidentally built and consciously chosen. Clara realized that some stories didn't end with wedding bells or dramatic declarations. They ended with spaghetti dinners and forever breakfasts, and the quiet certainty that what you had built together was exactly what you had been looking for. Final, meaningful ending. 2 years later, on a sun-drenched Saturday morning in Boston Common, Clara watched her family through the lens of pure contentment. Leo, now 4 years and 2 months old, and possessing the confidence that came with being a big brother, was teaching his twin sister Maya the finer points of duck diplomacy at the park's pond. Their voices carried across the water a mixture of serious instruction and delighted laughter that never failed to make her smile. The big duck is the boss, Leo explained patiently, pointing to a particularly majestic mallard. You have to give him the bread first, or the other ducks get jealous and cause drama. Duck drama is the worst kind of drama, Maya agreed solemnly. Though Clara suspected her 4-year-old daughter had no idea what drama actually meant. Elias sat beside her on the park bench, their 6-month-old daughter, Sophia, sleeping peacefully in his arms. The baby had arrived as a surprise, unplanned, but deeply wanted, and had completed their family in ways none of them had expected. She was a perfect blend of both parents, with Clara's hazel eyes and Elias's dark hair, and a temperament that suggested she would be giving her older siblings excellent advice within a few years. Penny for your thoughts, Elias said quietly, adjusting Sophia's blanket against the spring breeze. Just thinking about how far we've come, Clara replied, leaning into his shoulder. 2 years ago, I was convinced that loving you would destroy everything I had built. Now I can't imagine our life any other way. The Vance Foundation's children's literacy program had expanded beyond their wildest projections, now serving over 30,000 children across 5 states. Clara had been promoted to Director of National Programs, a position that challenged her professionally, while allowing the flexibility she needed as a mother of 3. More importantly, the work felt like a calling rather than just a career, the chance to make a real difference in children's lives while building something meaningful with the man she loved. Mama! Papa! Leo's excited voice interrupted her thoughts. The boss duck likes our bread. He's telling the other ducks we're good humans. Papa. The title had emerged naturally 6 months ago, around the time the twins had started pre-K and needed to explain their family structure to curious classmates. Elias had cried the first time Leo had used it, overwhelmed by the simple acceptance and love it represented. That's excellent diplomatic work, Elias called back, his voice carrying the warm humor that had become his trademark with the children. International duck relations are very important. Clara smiled at the exchange, remembering the man who had once been too frightened of fatherhood to even discuss the possibility. The transformation wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was the quiet evolution of someone who had learned that love was a choice made daily, not a feeling that struck like lightning and faded just as quickly. Their wedding had been small and simple, held in the same Italian resort where they had found each other again. Leo and Maya had served as ring bearers, carrying their responsibilities with the seriousness of tiny diplomats. The ceremony had been less about declaring their love to the world and more about acknowledging what they had already built together. A partnership based on respect, growth, and the shared commitment to putting their family first. "I got a call from Marcus yesterday," Clara said, remembering the conversation that had both surprised and delighted her. "Willowbrook Academy wants to partner with the Foundation on a new early childhood reading initiative." "Full circle," Elias observed, shifting Sophia to his other arm with Baptistes. "Are you interested?" Surprisingly, yes. It would mean going back to where it all started, but as the person I am now, rather than the person I was then. She paused, watching Leo help Maya feed the ducks with careful attention to proper bread distribution. Sometimes the best way forward is to revisit the past with new understanding. "Speaking of moving forward," Elias said, his voice carrying a note of barely contained excitement, "I have something to tell you." Clara looked at him suspiciously. She had learned to recognize that particular tone. It usually preceded announcements about surprise weekend trips or elaborate birthday party plans that would require significant logistical coordination. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything. Yet." He grinned at her expression. "But I may have put an offer on a house." "A house?" Clara's voice climbed several octaves. "What kind of house? Where? When? How did you even have time to look at houses without me knowing?" "The kind with a big backyard for duck pond reenactments, and a library where you can work when inspiration strikes at midnight," Elias replied, clearly enjoying her flustered reaction. "In Wellesley, about 40 minutes from the Foundation offices, and I may have had some help from 2 very small consultants who are excellent at identifying houses with good climbing trees." "You took Leo and Maya house hunting without telling me?" "I took Leo and Maya on what they thought were random weekend drives that happened to include stops at open houses," Elias corrected with mock solemnity. "They provided very thorough reviews of each property's playground potential." Before Clara could formulate a proper response to this revelation, Maya came running over with the kind of urgent news that only 4-year-olds considered earth-shattering. "Mama, Papa, the boss duck has a girlfriend, and they're holding hands with their beaks. And Leo says that means they're in love, like you and Papa." "That's very romantic," Clara agreed gravely. "Ducks are known for their excellent relationship advice." "Can we get a duck for the new house?" Leo asked hopefully, having apparently overheard enough of the adult conversation to understand that residential changes were being discussed. "For the big backyard that Papa mentioned?" Elias shot Clara an apologetic look. "We may have discussed hypothetical pet ownership during our hypothetical house visits." "Hypothetical," Clara repeated dryly. "Right," looking at her family, at Elias holding their sleeping daughter while fielding enthusiastic pet requests from their older children, at Leo and Maya, covered in breadcrumbs and duck pond water, and absolutely radiant with joy. Clara felt the same sense of overwhelming gratitude that had become her constant companion over the past 2 years. This wasn't the life she had planned when she was married to Elias the first time. It wasn't even the life she had imagined when she had chosen to become a single mother. It was something entirely unexpected and infinitely better. The result of 2 people learning to love without fear, to trust without guarantees, and to build something together that was stronger than either of them alone. "So," Elias said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear, "what do you think? Ready for the next adventure?" "I think," she said, reaching over to touch Sophia's tiny hand, "that I'm ready for whatever adventures this family wants to take on, even if they involve hypothetical ducks." As Leo and Maya returned to their important work of duck diplomacy, and Sophia stirred contentedly in her father's arms, Clara realized that some stories didn't end with dramatic revelations or grand gestures. They ended with ordinary Saturday mornings and extraordinary love, with the knowledge that what you had built together was exactly what you had been looking for all along. Sometimes the greatest adventures were the ones that felt like coming home. Final interactive question. Would you have made the same choice as Clara, to risk everything for a second chance at love with Elias, knowing his past fears? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories. The Granada Reckoning. From bankruptcy to helicopter, Audrey Sinclair saw her life shatter as the gavel hit the marble in the silent New York courtroom. Her ex-husband, Marcus Thorne, a man who had built an entire empire on her ideas, smiled smugly when the judge declared her destitute. Clinging to a cardboard box as she left the courthouse, his laughter echoed in the marble lobby, a sharp, cold sound of absolute victory. He thought he had destroyed her. He thought she was nothing. What Marcus ignored is that nothing is the most dangerous thing a person can become. He would see her again, but not in a courtroom. He would see her from the ground of Charleston's historic Battery Park as she descended from a private helicopter. Part 1. The Sentence and the Echo of Scorn. The fluorescent lights of the New York Supreme Court buzzed with a flat, indifferent sound that drilled into Audrey Sinclair's skull. Based on the terms of the prenuptial agreement signed on January 14, 2018, the judge, Justice Thompson, stated, "All assets, properties, and holdings acquired during the marriage are designated as the exclusive property of Mr. Marcus Thorne." Audrey had been his chief strategist. Her mind, her analytics, her astonishing ability to spot market trends 3 steps ahead of everyone else had been the rocket fuel. He was the face, the charismatic closer. She was the architect, drawing the blueprints in silence. The court denies Ms. Sinclair's petition for spousal support. All joint accounts are to be released to Mr. Thorne. The residence on Park Avenue must be vacated by Ms. Sinclair before 6 o'clock this evening. Marcus Thorne, immaculate in a custom suit, leaned back. He did not look at Audrey. He was checking his watch. In the gallery, his new associate, a 22-year-old influencer named Childre, stifled a theatrical cough. Session adjourned. The gavel cracked, sharp and final. 10 years of her life, erased. Invisible to the scrum of reporters, Audrey walked out, her cheap shoes echoing hollowly on the marble. In her hands, a small archival box, the sum total of her new life. She reached the grand, resonant rotunda of the courthouse. She stopped, needing a single second to breathe, and then she heard it. "Marcus, honey, we're late for the Nobu reservation," Schuyler's high, reedy voice. "Plenty of time, babe." Audrey saw his reflection in the heavy glass doors. Marcus was adjusting his tie. He caught her reflection. He saw her, standing there, shoulders slumped, holding her pathetic box. A low chuckle began in his chest. It grew into a full, rich laugh of pure, unadulterated scorn. A laugh that said, "You thought you were my partner. You were only an employee, and now you're fired." They swept past her, disappearing into the back of a waiting Maybach. The laughter hung in the air, echoing off the stone. It was the cruelest sound she had ever heard. The ruin. Audrey walked. She had $400 in a bank account. Marcus had forgotten to freeze, and a mountain of personal debt he had assigned to her during the divorce. She was, for all intents and purposes, ruined. She registered at the Star Hostel in a rough area of Queens, a place where rooms were paid for by the hour. She opened her laptop. The screen lit up with the factory welcome screen. Wiped. 10 years of her work, strategies, and notes. Gone. "You are nothing," the laughter echoed in her ears. "We'll see," she whispered to the peeling wall. The despair was a cold ocean, but the laughter, that laughter was a single, hard piece of flint. And in the absolute darkness of that motel room, Audrey Sinclair struck it. Part 2. The Blacklisted Architect. The next 6 weeks were a masterclass in humiliation. Audrey, the woman who once advised on billion-dollar acquisitions, was learning the subtle art of existing on $20 a day. She was quickly blacklisted. "Audrey, your resume is formidable," an old acquaintance from J.P. Morgan said over the phone. "But the thing is, there's just not a fit right now." The second call was more direct. Listen, Audrey. Off the record, you're radioactive. Carras and Thorne's legal team sent out, let's call it a dossier, to every major player in the city. Non-competes, NDAs, and a very strong inference of unstable behavior. Nobody will touch you. He had not only taken her past, he had stolen her future. The toxic dream. One night, scrolling the news, a glossy photo of Marcus and Skylar filled the screen. They were at the Helios Foundation Gala. Marcus was announcing his new flagship project, the one she had warned him against. Helios Green City. It was a multi-billion-dollar development in the South Carolina Low Country, promising a sustainable, carbon-neutral metropolis. The future of urban living, the headline bellowed. Audrey had told him the land was unstable. She had run the geological surveys herself. The bedrock was fractured, and the water table was contaminated from an old industrial plant. It was a money pit. Beautiful, shimmering, but fraudulent. Seeing him sell that dream, a cold academic fury replaced her despair. He wasn't just a monster. He was a stupid monster. The Hail Mary pill. That night, she made one last-ditch call. Sarah, it's Audrey. Audrey Sinclair. Sarah Jimenez had been her best friend in business school. I'm calling to ask for a favor. I need a job. Anything. Sarah, now working for a small tech consulting firm, returned the old familiar warmth, mixed with pity. Audrey, I can't. We're in the middle of a strategic review. We're being acquired. Audrey's heart sank. Who is it? She asked, stirring her instant noodles listlessly. A private equity group, Stryker Investments. Ever heard of them? Audrey's spoon stopped. Stryker Investments. The firm was less a company and more a myth, the boogeyman of the S&P 500. They were rumored to be run by a single, reclusive billionaire of shadows and dust named Damian Sterling. They were known for two things: an obsession with disruptive technology and an absolute intolerance for fraud. They're acquiring you? Audrey's voice was suddenly sharp. Yeah, the due diligence is insane. They're led by a woman, Evelyn Leon. She's like a Terminator in a pencil skirt. Why? Audrey's mind was moving at its old forgotten speed. The pieces clicked. Stryker. Helios. Marcus. I don't need a job, Audrey said, standing up. I need a meeting. I need you to get me 10 minutes with Evelyn Leon. Tell her I have actionable intelligence on the Helios Green City project. Tell her Marcus Thorne is building a $9 billion house of cards on a toxic swamp, and I can prove it. Sarah sighed. Okay, I'll try. But Audrey, be careful. These people are not like Marcus. They're dangerous. So am I, Sarah, Audrey said, hanging up the phone. She had just forgotten. She looked at the photo of Marcus on her laptop screen. She wasn't crawling back. She was going to burn his kingdom and use the ashes as leverage. Part 3. The Audition in the Sky. 2 days later, an email arrived. The sender was Elion@Stryker.global. The body contained only a time and an address. 10 o'clock a.m. Tomorrow. The Sterling Tower. Floor 45. Do not be late. Audrey spent the entire night in the New York Public Library, fueled by stale coffee. She wasn't just going to present a problem. She was going to present an opportunity. She shredded the Helios Green City prospectus. She cross-referenced the contaminated land data she had foresightedly saved on a personal USB with the current databases of the EPA. She analyzed the bond structures Marcus was using for Phase 2 financing. She found the linchpin. Marcus wasn't just concealing cleanup costs. He was actively falsifying environmental reports to secure green bonds from European investors. It wasn't just a lie. It was wire fraud, securities fraud, and a dozen other felonies. But she went deeper. The fractured bedrock that Marcus saw as a flaw, she saw as a perfect location for something entirely different. Geothermal energy generation. Her presentation was 12 slides, no fluff, just facts, figures, and a conclusion so brutal it was beautiful. The test. At 9:45 a.m., Audrey entered the lobby of the Sterling Tower. A private elevator whisked her silently to the 45th floor. The doors opened directly into the reception area. Evelyn Leon, a woman with eyes so pale blue they looked like ice, waited. "Ms. Sinclair, I am Evelyn Leon. You have 10 minutes. Walk with me." "Mr. Thorne is not just underestimating cleanup costs," Audrey began, her voice steady. "He is actively committing securities fraud by falsifying EPA filings to secure green bonds." Evelyn's pace didn't change. "We are aware. We've known for 6 weeks. His bond issuers in Frankfurt are our partners. We're already positioned to short his stock into annihilation when the news breaks." Audrey's heart hammered. A test. This was the moment. "You're seeing the fraud," Audrey said, stopping. Evelyn stopped and turned, raising an eyebrow. "You're not seeing the opportunity. The fractured bedrock, the high temperature gradient," Audrey continued. "It's a structural nightmare for skyscrapers, but it is a perfect vessel for a closed-loop geothermal energy plant." She held up her laptop. "Helios Green City is a fraud, but the land is a multi-billion-dollar energy source. Stryker Investments has a renewable energy division. You let Marcus continue. You let him leverage himself to the hilt for his Phase 2 financing. You wait for him to break ground. The moment his excavators hit the contaminated aquifer and the EPA shuts him down, that is when you strike." "How?" Evelyn asked. Her voice a whisper. "You don't just short the stock. You buy the debt. You buy it all. When he defaults, and he will, you don't seize the company. You seize the asset, the land itself. You get it for pennies on the dollar. You at Thorne Global Acquisitions collapse, and Stryker Investments builds the largest geothermal energy plant in the Southeast, powering half of Charleston." Audrey closed the laptop. "You don't just make him a cautionary tale. You make him a footnote. You make billions, not millions, and it's all legal." Silence. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of Evelyn's mouth. "Everyone who comes here offers revenge. They are emotional. They are a mess. You came here offering a balance sheet. The problem is not the revenge," Evelyn noted. "It's the execution. Mr. Sterling hates Marcus Thorne. It's an old rivalry." "I didn't know," Audrey lied. "No," Evelyn said. Her smile widened. "I'm sure you didn't. Mr. Sterling is on the Odyssey, docked in Miami. He's expecting you." Now. Audrey was stunned. "We've been watching you since the day you left that courthouse, Ms. Sinclair. The meeting was the final test. You passed it. A car is waiting for you downstairs." "What about my presentation?" Audrey asked, holding up her laptop. "He's already seen it," Evelyn said, without looking back. She was streaming it from her laptop the second she opened it. Audrey walked into the elevator. She had entered as a pauper. She was leaving as something else entirely. Part 4. The confrontation at the port. The black Mercedes S-Class sped through the traffic with the serene indifference of a shark. The car stopped at Pier 59 in Miami. Docked at the end of the pier, dwarfing the other super yachts, was the Odyssey. A 400-foot giant of matte gray steel and smoked glass. Damian Sterling was not what she expected. He looked like a renegade college professor, with an untamed mop of gray hair and wire-rim glasses. But when he turned, his eyes were the most intelligent, unsettling things she had ever seen. "Ms. Sinclair, please sit." His voice was quiet with a slight, unplaceable European accent. "Evelyn is impressed," he said. "Evelyn is never impressed. She thinks you are a scalpel." "I agree." "Do you hate Marcus Thorne?" he asked. "I have a professional disagreement with his business model," Audrey said cautiously. Damian smiled. "Not with me. Let's be clear. I despise him. Marcus Thorne is a parasite. He is a symptom of a disease in our economy. A man who builds nothing, who creates nothing, who only brands. He is a hollow man, and hollow men must be broken. He walked to the window. 20 years ago, I had a data analytics firm. Marcus Thorne, then just a junior VP at a larger firm, handled our portfolio. He deliberately sunk our funding round. He lied to our investors. Then he and his firm absorbed our IP in bankruptcy. He built his first fortune on the bones of my work. Audrey shivered. The laughter. It was the same story. Your plan is excellent. It is intelligent. It is profitable. And it is lethal. But it is missing one thing. You. You are trying to give me the map. I don't want the map, Audrey. I want the cartographer. I'm not offering you a job. I anoint generals in. The geothermal project. It is yours. I am opening a new division. Stryker Urban Dynamics. You will be its president. You will oversee the acquisition of Thorne's debt. You will manage the seizure of the Helios asset. And you will build that power plant. You will not only be the architect of his ruin, you will be the architect of the future that replaces him. What do you get out of this? She whispered. 2 things, Damien said, holding up his fingers. 1. The Helios land is a brilliant strategic asset. Your geothermal plan will revolutionize the energy grid in the southeast. It will make us billions. 2. A dark smile touched his lips. I delight. I see the look on his face when he realizes the nothing he threw away was the only thing that could destroy him. That is my price, Audrey. You must be the one to do it. You must be the face of his reckoning. He won't see me coming, Audrey said, the old fire returning, burning hotter now. Refined. Oh, he won't see you at all. Not until the very end. Damien stood up, extending a hand. It begins today. You are no longer Audrey Sinclair, the victim. You are President Sinclair of Stryker Urban Dynamics. Go to work. Part 5. The Arrival and the Reckoning. The next 18 months were a blur of transformation. Audrey Sinclair ceased to exist. In her place, President Sinclair was forged. She became the primary creditor of Helios Green City. She owned Marcus Thorne. He just didn't know it. Operating in silence, Audrey bought his key debt pieces from banks in Frankfurt, Zurich, and London. She was not just the brilliant analyst. She became the general. The final trap. As predicted, the EPA shutdown hit. Marcus, desperate and over-leveraged, doubled down. He announced a massive black-tie Helios gala to be held at the project's gleaming sales center to woo his final round of investors. It was an arrogant, desperate move to save face. He's throwing a party, Audrey told Damien. He's inviting his friends to his own execution. Send the jet, she said. The night of the Helios gala was a tempest. A furious late-autumn storm lashed the South Carolina lowcountry. The nearby private airstrip was officially closed. Nothing was landing. Then, through the roar of the storm, came a new sound. A low, tearing whistle that grew into an earth-shaking roar. 2 blinding white landing lights pierced the darkness, descending at an impossibly steep angle. The aircraft was a sleek, silver Gulfstream G700, famous for its ability to handle extreme weather. It landed on the flooded strip with a smoothness that defied physics. It taxied right up to the plaza in front of the gala. The music died. The entire party was silent, staring at the apparition. A hydraulic stair ramp deployed. First emerged 2 figures, Evelyn Leon and the closer, the head of Stryker litigation. Then, a 3rd figure appeared in the doorway. She wore a cream-white, double-breasted power pantsuit. No dress, no jewelry, save a simple, elegant watch. Her hair was cut into that familiar sharp bob. Marcus Thorne squinted. His smug smile froze. The champagne glass in his hand began to tremble. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." Audrey Sinclair descended the steps. She did not rush. The wind whipped her suit, but she seemed as unperturbed as the steel of the jet behind her. She walked through the torrential rain, Evelyn Leon and the lawyer flanking her. The glass doors of the gala hissed open. Audrey walked in. She stopped at the foot of the stage, looking up at her ex-husband. Marcus's face had gone the color of ash. The arrogant smile, the confident posture, all gone. He was staring at a ghost. Audrey smiled. It was the smile of a predator who has finally cornered his prey. "Marcus." Her voice was clear and audible in the silent room. "A lovely party. What a shame you're celebrating it on my property." The checkmate. "Audrey, what is this? Some kind of joke?" he stammered, trying to laugh. "That would be me, or more accurately, Stryker Urban Dynamics, of which I am president," she said, gesturing to Evelyn. "What you'll find in the dossier Evelyn is handing out is a detailed debt restructuring breakdown. Mr. Thorne has been in breach of his primary loan covenants for 72 hours. Stryker Investments acquired all those positions." She stepped onto the stage, standing next to the massive, glittering architectural model of the city that would never be. "You sold a dream, Marcus, but you built it on a swamp, and now the note is due. As the exclusive creditor, Stryker Urban Dynamics has exercised its rights. We are not seizing your company. It's worthless. We are seizing the asset. This indoor, this building, all of it. The deed was transferred an hour ago. You, your investors, and your girlfriend are trespassing on private property." Skylar let out a small shriek and bolted for the door. But I am," Marcus stammered. "Oh, it gets worse, Marcus," Audrey said, stepping closer. The lawyer handed Marcus a thick stack of papers. "Those," Audrey said, "are not from me. Those are from the U.S. Attorney's Office. A federal indictment. Securities fraud. Wire fraud. The undercover UDEF agent you tried to bribe last week sends his regards. It seems fate has a funny way of working out." Marcus finally broke. The arrogant master of the universe collapsed. "Please, Audrey, please, you can't. I'll give you anything. Half. Just call it off." He was begging. On his knees, Audrey knelt to meet his level. She was close enough to smell the fear on him. "I don't want your money, Marcus. I have my own. I want you to remember. I want you to remember this moment every day for the rest of your life." She stood up, smoothing the front of her suit. "You were right, Marcus. I walked out of that courthouse with nothing. But the difference between you and me? I know how to build an empire from nothing. You only know how to lie." She turned away, leaving him kneeling on the stage. Federal agents, who had been waiting outside with her team, walked calmly toward the stage. Audrey Sinclair did not look back. She walked through the crowd of stunned billionaires and stepped out the glass doors. The storm was already beginning to abate. Evelyn Leon waited for her at the foot of the jet stairs. "A clean result, Madam President." "It's a start, Evelyn," Audrey replied, boarding the jet. "The hard part begins tomorrow. I have a power plant to build." She settled into the warm, silent cabin. As the jet's powerful engines spooled up, Audrey looked out the window. She saw the flashing blue and red lights of the agents' cars. She saw the pale, defeated silhouette of Marcus Thorne being escorted away. She did not laugh. She simply took a sip of water, opened her laptop, and went back to work. Meaningful conclusion. The power of nothing. The greatest comebacks are not just about getting rich. They are about reclaiming your power. Audrey didn't just get even. She got ahead. She proved that true success is not about who you know or what you are given, but what you can build. While Marcus Thorne's name became synonymous with fraud, Audrey Sinclair's name was etched onto the Stryker resonance plant, an engineering marvel that powers the entire region of Charleston to this day. She didn't just return in a billionaire's jet. She returned as the person in the pilot's seat. What do you think of Audrey's story? Was her revenge too much, or was it a perfect checkmate? Leave me your opinion in the comments below. If you loved this story of justice and resilience, be sure to like and share it with someone who needs to see it. And please subscribe to the channel for more real-life drama every week. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Part 6. The Construction of Resonance. The jet ride back to the Stryker Tower in New York was not a celebration. It was a transition. Audrey was no longer focused on Marcus. He was a finished transaction. Her mind was already consumed by the complex, multi-billion-dollar engineering feat ahead. The Stryker Resonance Plant. Damian Sterling was true to his word. Stryker Urban Dynamics was given unlimited resources and full autonomy. Audrey, now operating at the highest level of corporate power, flourished. The president's vision. Audrey's leadership style was a fusion of her technical brilliance and a surprising, newfound humanity. She insisted that the resonance plant not only be the most advanced geothermal facility in the world, but also an architectural and environmental beacon. The land as a partner. Instead of bulldozing the site, she implemented her rewilding concepts, using the fractured bedrock to maximize geothermal output while restoring the contaminated wetlands around the site. A new culture. Her team wasn't filled with the ruthless egoists she had once known. She hired brilliant ethical engineers, urban planners, and environmental scientists, many of whom had been sidelined or overlooked by companies like Thorn Global. She treated them not as employees, but as co-architects of the future. Evelyn Leon, her COO, who initially saw Audrey as a tool for a hostile takeover, grew to genuinely respect her. You see the numbers, but you see the people they affect too, Evelyn once noted over a late-night strategy session. Marcus only saw zeros. That's why he's in prison, and you're building a city. The quiet kingmaker, Audrey and Damian Sterling maintained a relationship built on deep professional respect and a subtle, unspoken emotional connection. Damian was the strategic anchor, always anticipating the next 5 moves on the global chessboard. He never interfered with her project, but guided her with philosophical insights. The power you wield now, Audrey, Damian once told her, is not in the spending, but in the restraint. Never seek applause, only seek efficacy. Their bond was the most authentic relationship she had ever known, a partnership of equals, focused on creation rather than consumption. Part 7. The Echoes of the Past. While Audrey was busy designing a sustainable future, Marcus Thorne's world was the antithesis of sustainability. His trial was swift, heavily covered, and humiliating. He was convicted on multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy. He was sentenced to a substantial prison term in a federal facility. The loneliest sound. Marcus, the man who thrived on attention and luxury, now existed in a harsh, monotonous environment. His lawyers abandoned him. Skylar deleted her entire Instagram history with him and quickly found a new, less federally scrutinized benefactor. In his cell, the only sound Marcus truly feared was the silence that forced him to confront the simple, devastating truth. He had destroyed his own life, not Audrey's. The geothermal power plant, visible on clear days as a clean, angular structure replacing the toxic swamp, became his daily, visible torment. It was a constant, powerful monument to the woman he had dismissed as nothing, a monument to her superior vision, her intelligence, and his catastrophic arrogance. He finally understood the true weight of her last words. "I know how to build an empire from nothing. You only know how to lie." Conclusion. The new balance. After 2 years of intense construction, the Stryker Resonance Plant went fully operational, providing clean, renewable energy to hundreds of thousands of homes. It was celebrated as a global model for environmental cleanup and innovation. Audrey, now in her early 40s, stood on the newly landscaped grounds, watching the massive turbines turn, a symbol of harnessed, clean power. She had built her empire, fulfilled her purpose, and secured a legacy that would last for generations. She had everything she had lost, and infinitely more. Yet she had also found something unexpected: peace. Her revenge had not burned her, as Damien had warned it might. It had simply been the hard, cold catalyst she needed to clear the path for her own brilliant destiny. Her greatest victory was not Marcus's fall, but the fact that she no longer needed to think of him at all. Her life was too vast, too consequential, to be reduced to a reaction against her past. She had achieved the true goal of power, the freedom to focus entirely on creation. Like and share this amazing conclusion. If you believe that building a better future is the best form of revenge, do you think Audrey and Damien Sterling would ever explore a romantic relationship, given their unique, powerful partnership? Share your predictions in the comments. Subscribe for more stories of justice, resilience, and success. Part 8. The Architect's New World. 2 years after the Stryker resonance plant began humming with clean energy, Audrey Sinclair was no longer just the president of Stryker Urban Dynamics. She was a global figure in sustainable technology. She spent her time collaborating with heads of state and pioneering new projects in Asia and Europe. She had built her purpose, but one element of her life remained in a unique, complex equilibrium: her relationship with Damien Sterling. Their partnership was flawless, a symbiosis of vision, intellect, and trust. He was the anchor of strategy. She was the engine of execution. Yet it was purely professional, guarded by both their past wounds and their mutual respect for boundaries. One evening, after closing a complex deal that secured their next major project in Dubai, Audrey and Damien were having dinner in a private study on the Odyssey. "You handled the negotiations perfectly, Audrey," Damien said, leaning back. "You anticipated their final offer before they did. Marcus taught you well, indirectly." "Marcus taught me about human weakness," Audrey corrected softly. "You taught me about strategic strength." Damien looked at her, his intense eyes softened by the candlelight. "I think you had the strength all along. I just handed you the steel." He reached across the table, not for her hand, but for a simple, uncut piece of amber she used as a paperweight. "I have no more worlds to conquer with vengeance, Audrey. Marcus is where he belongs. The company is secure. The next stage of Stryker requires a new kind of dedication." "Are you retiring?" she asked, surprised. "No," he smiled faintly, "but I'm stepping back from the day-to-day. I need a change of focus. And as for you," he paused, setting the amber down, "I never hired you for your ideas, though they were brilliant. I hired you because I fell in love with your integrity. I saw the raw, uncompromising core of the woman Marcus tried to break, and I wanted to be the one to stand beside that strength." Audrey's breath hitched. She had seen him as a mentor, a strategic partner, but she felt the deep, quiet pull of him, the substance he represented. "I am offering you more than partnership, Audrey," Damien continued, his voice low and serious. "I am offering you balance, a life where you do not have to choose between your power and your heart. I want to build a life with you, where the greatest project is our own peace. I will be your shield, your sounding board, and your devoted partner. Will you accept the cartographer's crown? Not just the presidency of Stryker, but the co-authorship of our future." Audrey met his gaze. She didn't hesitate. She had spent years rebuilding her professional world. Now, it was time to build her private one. "Yes, Damien," she said, a wave of profound certainty washing over her. "Let's build that future." The final stone of peace. 3 months later, News of Audrey Sinclair's engagement to the reclusive billionaire Damian Sterling sent gentle ripples through the global financial community. It was a union celebrated for its power and its quiet authenticity, a true partnership of equals. Meanwhile, back in his maximum security facility, Marcus Thorne received a letter. It wasn't from a lawyer or a business associate. It was a simple, sealed envelope from his financial trustee. Inside was a single photo, the official announcement of the engagement. Marcus looked at the serene, powerful beauty of Audrey, standing beside the man who had meticulously engineered his downfall. He saw the genuine peace in her eyes, the sheer distance between her world and his. He crumpled the photo. He had once looked at a defeated Audrey in a courthouse lobby and laughed a laugh of pure scorn. Now, confined to his narrow cell, the truth struck him with finality. The greatest loss of his life wasn't his company, his wealth, or his freedom. It was the possibility of a love built on integrity. He would spend the rest of his life as the footnote he dreaded, a cautionary tale of a man who traded true partnership for vanity, and consequently lost everything. Audrey, however, was already looking forward. She had built her empire from nothing, secured her legacy, and found her truest match. She had proven that the most powerful revenge is not just surviving the collapse, but thriving so beautifully that your past becomes utterly irrelevant to your future. Like and share this amazing series if you believe that a woman's greatest power is her integrity and vision. What name do you think Audrey and Damian should name their future home estate, symbolizing their quiet power? Share your ideas in the comments. Subscribe now for the next epic tale of power, justice, and human resilience. Epilogue. 10 years later. The residue and the resonance. 10 years have passed since the Met Gala night and the founding of Stryker Urban Dynamics. The world has changed, but the foundations built by Audrey Sinclair and Damian Sterling remain unshakable. The legacy of resonance. Audrey, now in her mid-50s, stood on the observation deck of the Stryker Resonance Plant in South Carolina. The facility was no longer just a power plant, it was a campus. Surrounding the geothermal core was the Sinclair Institute for Sustainable Architecture, a think tank and educational center she founded, dedicated to mentoring the next generation of ethical, visionary builders. She was celebrated globally, a TED speaker, a subject of university case studies, and a quiet, powerful force redefining urban energy. Her work, her integrity, and her quiet refusal to court the spotlight defined her legacy. Her marriage to Damian was the anchor. They had built a life of profound substance, moving with quiet purpose between their homes in Big Sur, Dubai, and the Odyssey. Their bond was one of mutual strategic respect and an effortless, deep affection. A love built on the shared pursuit of meaningful creation. The final contrast. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Marcus Thorne was serving the final years of his substantial sentence. He was eligible for parole, but the years of humiliation and confinement had eroded the charismatic veneer that was once his only asset. He was a man without an audience, without a brand, and utterly without hope. He sometimes heard the news of Audrey, not on a screen, but whispered by a guard who had read an article about the brilliant woman who engineered the largest clean energy takeover in U.S. history. The guard saw her as a hero of business. Marcus only saw his executioner. One day, his parole officer presented him with a form for potential job placements. The officer mentioned a new, massive industrial park being built in the region, a state-of-the-art facility looking for basic manual labor. "It's honest work, Mr. Thorne. Part of the Stryker Urban Dynamics development," the officer explained. Marcus stared at the paperwork, the clean, minimalist logo of the company, founded and led by Audrey. The realization was the final, crushing blow of irony. His only path to earning an honest living after his release was through the charity of the woman whose life he had tried to ruin. He was reduced to being a footnote in the physical infrastructure of her empire. He didn't take the job. He couldn't. The end of the story. Audrey stood on the deck, feeling the warmth of the sun and the steady, quiet power of the turbines. She was surrounded by students and engineers, all working to solve the world's largest problems. Her eyes held the quiet confidence of a woman who knows her worth is not negotiable. The scornful laughter that once echoed in a courthouse lobby had been completely overwritten by the steady, powerful resonance of the world she built. The story was over. The victim was gone. The scorn was silenced. All that remained was the quiet, indelible power of the cartographer's crown.